Fuck yeah.
Shit, I missed that song.
That's a jam.
It is a jam. And I feel like we're coming into a timer now where we actually are blowing the wind of God on COVID-19.
True.
I feel like we're at a bit of a turning point. But
we're definitely socially blowing that.
Except Taylor's on lockdown.
It is really funny that we started.
Yo, Tay, why are you in your bathroom?
I am in my bathroom because Kyla is gonna poop.
Be careful. You be careful here.
Kyla is super. We are rationally, very rationally, creating a 0% chance of COVID right now because Kyle's about to have a baby, and if she got COVID, even though that opportunity or chance is relatively low, then she would have to miss appointments leading up to giving birth. And if I got COVID within 10 days of her going into labor, then I wouldn't be able to go to the birth. So it's just like a shut it down, just it'll completely eliminate the chance. And so we have no issues. So
I'm surprised that you want to be there. I always pegged you as the kind of partner that would just be like, all right, cool, take care of your stuff, and I'll see you in a couple days.
That's really that makes me feel really good about our relationship and how you view me.
I actually thought that I was thinking the same thing too, but it surprises me to hear you say that, like, give that reasoning behind that, because when we were talking about this arrangement, you were saying initially that you had actually really just missed that like excitement of like March 2020.
Yeah.
And so like you were thinking that it would be fun to like before the baby gets here and there's like all these other things that you have to like worry about and take care of. You wanted to like go back into like recreating and like reliving that experience, if you will.
Yeah.
And just going into like a pretend lockdown.
Yeah. Well, I do. There is a part of me that does miss the, the March 2020 sort of like slumber party lockdown vibe.
There was a vibe. It was a vibe.
Right?
Like I remember buying like a bunch of liquor and watching like local DJs do Twitch shows, and like everybody was like, it was a fucking vibe.
It's so funny.
It's very similar to like when it when there's a snowstorm coming.
Yes.
And like you're like, ooh, the power might go out. It's kind of like that. But then it very quickly wasn't.
Yeah, like when the just like in a snowstorm, like when the power goes out, like the first hour or two, you light candles and you turn your flashlights on, but then you start to like run out of batteries, and then you run out of candles, and then the shit in your fridge starts going bad, and then you realize that it's actually.
And then you go, okay, this is fucking. I'm fucking done with this.
We should make red hats that just say "Make COVID Fun Again," and put that on our merch store.
Yo, that's actually a pretty good idea.
I don't know about that. Hey, listen, speaking of COVID and speaking about how you're all in lockdown there, Tay, I bet you would love to be one of these people. Now here, before I say this, an interesting little thing. Since COVID came out, especially over the last year.
Since it came out, since its initial release.
Since its initial release, that hot album off the press, since the big hit, COVID. The two of you, I think you guys rewatched Contagion like recently, right? Like
I watched it on the plane from Ecuador to
wow, you should have been
to Fort Lauderdale.
They should have took you off that flight.
You're a masochist.
So you guys, I haven't seen it since it came out. I really don't remember anything, but you keep saying that you guys have referenced this on the show several times, and I always just nod and go, oh yeah. But like Matt Damon's character, he was like convinced he couldn't get it. Is that correct? But that wasn't
almost
it's
immediately,
not even,
right? And that's
it's not him being convinced. It's that he knows, and everybody else around him, including people from the CDC and all the major like health organizations, they are completely accepting of that as well.
Like
So,
a portion
but
of
is
a
it
small portion of the population
You can't get it.
just has immunity.
Yeah, okay. And
for
so
whatever
he thought, and he was just like, I'm one of those people.
Yeah, like he
Was he though?
he was in like a couple
he
like
catch it?
like exposure scenarios where like he should have. It was like as if in Contagion they really play it up like as if it was a zombie movie and he got bit
Right.
and he didn't turn into a zombie.
Yeah, right. Okay. So
yeah, it was like that black and white.
well, okay, so this is really interesting. This article, the title of it is "Scientists Seek to Solve Mystery of Why Some People Do Not Catch COVID."
Hmm.
So Phoebe Garrett, which is this woman right here, has attended university lectures without catching COVID. She's even hosted a party where everyone subsequently tested positive except her. Quote, "I think I've knowingly been exposed about 4 times," the 22-year-old said. In March of 2021, she participated in the world's first COVID-19 challenge trial. It sounds like something off of fucking Fear Factor, which involved dripping live virus into her nose.
Whoa.
And pegging her nostrils shut for several hours in a deliberate effort to infect her.
And then she
still-
got into like a paint mixer and they shook her up and like
Wait, hold
yeah.
on. Jared, was
sure
this a
it all-
study? Was this an actual study?
Yes. This was it was a trial. So her and other participants were essentially, they took liquid COVID, and just fucking daubed it into their nose,
Whoa.
and then plugged
Whoa.
her fucking nose for several hours to make sure it didn't go anywhere but in. And her body still resisted it. She, quote, "We had multiple rounds of tests and different methods of testing: throat swabs, nose swabs, other types of swabs that I'd never done before, like nasal wicks, where
wait.
you hold a swab in your nose for a minute." I was kind of letting that linger there just to make you think that they did like a butt swab or something. You know?
Yeah, but that is actually what I thought.
They did blood tests, but I never developed symptoms, never tested positive, Garrett said. My mom has always said that our family never gets flu, and I've wondered if there's maybe something behind that. Most people know someone who's stubbornly resisted catching COVID, despite everyone around them falling sick. Precisely how they do this remains a mystery, but scientists are beginning to find some clues. The hope is that identifying these mechanisms could lead to the development of drugs that not only protect people from catching COVID, but also prevent them from passing it on. Garrett is not the only challenge trial participant to have avoided becoming infected. Of the 34 who were exposed to the virus, 16 failed to develop an infection, which is really funny. That means like half of those people that were
Yeah,
like, I'll do
right.
this trial. They're like, fuck, now I got COVID.
Did they select those people because there seemed like
Yes.
there was a high likelihood that they would be resistant?
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So they
it wasn't
were,
like
I
a
feel like-
random.
no,
30
no, they were
people,
all
yeah,
people
yeah.
that were like, again, at a party, everyone catches
Yeah.
it but them. And so they're like, okay, well, you seem like a good candidate for this.
I feel like I would have done well in that trial.
I mean, I feel like maybe all three of us potentially could have for
Maybe.
as much as we know. Like
Yeah.
none of us have caught it yet.
Yeah.
And we know quite a few people in our lives that have.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
it is really wild to think, like, since Omicron started, how many more people I know who have had it.
We have been,
Totally,
for
yeah.
the most part, though, I think also because there's like this like sort of like subconscious bias probably towards like being more cautious. And I know I would be the first person to admit that like in the last couple months, my my carefulness towards like like making sure that I'm really like washing my hands really well after like every time I go in, like come and go from my house. I haven't been as good at doing like something like that. Like
It's a good
social
reminder.
distancing, like I'm pretty good when I'm in places, but like sometimes I'll now like catch myself like, oh, I'm pretty close to that person, but obviously like still wearing a mask all the time and stuff. But like
Guys, I've never been good at washing my hands. Not even in the last 2 years. It's really hasn't. I've just been bad at that. I wash my hands.
You're that guy that
couple
goes
times a day.
into you're that guy that goes into the Toronto Pearson Airport bathroom, takes a shit, and then just gets up and walks out.
but I get
And everyone looks at you and goes, ew, ew.
yeah, you don't even wipe. It's crazy.
I bidet.
but I think
And then continue to just clip your fingernails as you walk to the gate, just leaving trails of fucking clippings. It's disgusting. Dude. You're fucking disgusting.
You know what's funny is that you are joking, but you're sort of not too. Because
no. There's a lot of truth to this
there's
joke.
a lot of truth to this joke.
It's a half truth at best.
It's a 75% truth.
It's a quarter truth. It's a quarter truth.
The only truth the only thing that isn't truth in that truth is that you're not walking and doing it. You're actually just doing it at the gate in front of everyone.
It was a long travel. It was a long travel day.
Yeah, so long that your nails grew so long.
Yeah, I was sick of getting dirt in my fingernails.
Jared, I wanted to ask, so do you feel like you've been like pretty cautious too up until this point too? Especially like thinking like, I mean, up until you went to clinic.
Up until the clinic basically told me, go catch it.
No, they didn't say exactly
Pokemon
that, but they certainly made you feel more comfortable with like what might happen if you.
Yeah, I mean, I started going to the gym with you. Like, I'm considering going back to jiu-jitsu. Like, I'm out and about now, and I feel good. Yeah. I mean, but I was cautious. But like even the hand washing thing, like, I early days, I was like, oh, I'm gonna be really mindful about this and do it well and wash it for like. Do the whole like scrubbing in between the fingers thing and 2 minutes of lathering.
Well,
but like that.
Something that we were talking about.
Now it just it's back to normal sort of washing.
Something that we were talking about the other day when we were talking about masks and how I mean mask mandates have sort of been dropping all over North America, and they're going to be leaving Nova Scotia in the next by the time this comes out, it'll be like 10 days, and we were talking about like kind of what that means and everything, and kind of going back to just the conversation about like how COVID isn't just a respiratory disease, but it's like it's been this like massive psychological disorder that that basically everyone has suffered from in some way or another, in terms of like I notice these like little behaviors that I've developed over the past 2 years, like. When we were having the conversation about the masks, we were like talking about how taking away masks will, of course, have a massive social benefit, from the sense that they have social impacts. And one of the social impacts a negative social impact that masks have is that they on either a conscious or a subconscious level, it's a signal to everybody that like, hey, we all might be sick. And in some cases that's okay. You want to send that signal if you are sick, of course, and there's obviously reasons around why we did that for a really long time. But the underlying sort of signal that we are people that all could be sick standing around each other, and how like when I'm going to go take my dog out, and I live in an apartment building, I will, if I hear people in the hallway, I will just wait for them to be gone, because I go, you know what? I'd rather avoid the scenario where I have to try and manage like whether you are okay with me going in the elevator with you, or whether you want to come into the elevator with me, or whatever. Like just that situation. I'm going, yeah, you know what? I'll just avoid it entirely. I'll just wait until I don't hear you in the hallway anymore, and then I'll take my dog out. And like which
is so dumb.
It's so dumb, and it's so small, but it does have this like knock-on social impact,
and that's what I mean by dumb
over periods of time.
That's what I mean. I didn't mean like what you're doing is dumb. What I mean is like it's so like that is so dumb. Like that is such a dumb thing that we have going on right now, that like our minds work that way. It's just fucking stupid.
The thing that makes me like personally in my life, I think the biggest like social effect and like lasting social impact that I will have is I used to be like a really big hugger. Like, you're saying bye to your friends, you give them a hug. And I feel like now,
thank God that's over.
I really like it. Like it's nice to have like a really,
but you would just do it. You would just do it from behind and suddenly, and it's always like, oh, Jesus Christ.
That was just you.
Yeah.
That was just for you. And I was trying to send you a message. You just never seemed to pick up on it. But anyway, that's another thing.
Bids for connection.
But it does make me bummed. The thing though that I really appreciate about wearing the mask is like I've never in my life thought I'd be so well trained at smizing. Like I feel like my smize game is on point now.
Yeah.
Like
I don't
can-
even smile. I literally just go, I
Yeah,
just wince.
I can smile with my eyes
Yeah.
so fucking well now.
Guys,
Yeah.
I am so excited to not have to smile with my eyes ever again. Potentially.
You know what? I actually quite like though. The one thing I kind of like is like, you know when you see someone with a mask on and they're like really attractive with a mask on, and there's like
I don't know.
you've never noticed
know?
it. Like there's a bar that I go to and read, and the bartender is always wearing a mask, and she's a very gorgeous human being, but with a mask on, even then, just very beautiful. And I'm always but what I feel like that does is that it provides this sense of like, it's kind of like when you watch a horror movie, and like the most effective horror is the stuff they don't show you. You know, the things that psychologically you run through your head and you go, holy fucking shit. But you never saw anything, right? Like Blair Witch, you don't see anything. You just see a guy. The scariest scene in that whole movie is a guy just standing in a corner in a dark room. Like that movie is terrifying, but you don't see a goddamn thing in it. And so with this woman at the bar, I don't know what she looks like under the mask, but my mind,
there's something interesting about that.
Yeah, there's some kind of like, you fill in the blanks, and it's a kind of fun game of like, it's just like a fun little, I don't know.
Picture
like
this.
external...
There's a guy who comes and does massages at our house, and
You
wow,
close
very
your
relatable
eyes.
and yeah, wow.
Yeah. I mean, you close your eyes and you sort of just picture them any way you really want to, and it just you feel those strong hands all over your body. It just feels really nice.
Yeah, they are very strong and very firm, and I very much enjoy them. And we've only been doing that for the last like 6 months. He's worn a mask every time he's been here.
You don't know what he looks like.
I actually don't know what he looks like. He doesn't use social media at all.
Right.
So I actually don't know what he looks like.
So interesting.
And that occurred to me the other day, and I went, holy shit, if I walked by him on the street,
You wouldn't know.
might notice him. Like I might recognize his hair. I might recognize, but
You
like,
really might
would
not,
I?
though. Yeah, you
Actually,
really might not.
My massage therapist actually the same way. Like I started seeing her in the last like 6 months, and I have no idea what she looks like too, because I've only seen her with a mask on.
And
as
just
well.
like thinking
I mean,
about
I
that,
go
how
to a
odd
place.
that is.
I can't afford to have them come to me, but like
Yeah, no,
but like
you're
yeah,
normal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
And Taylor is
I'm not
better
a big,
than us.
I'm not
and
a big
that's-
investor.
I mean,
guy.
that's the whole point of that story, was to just show how much better he is than us. Back to the story. Possibly this whole thing was a reflection of the immune system rapidly shutting down an embryonic infection. Quote, in our previous studies with other viruses, we have seen early immune responses in the nose that are associated with resisting infection, said Professor Christopher Chu at Imperial College London, who led the study. He said, together, these findings imply that there is a struggle between the virus and host, which in our, quote, uninfected participants results in prevention of infection actually taking off, which is super fucking interesting. Some of them have also reported some mild symptoms, such as like, a stuffy nose, sore throat, or a little bit of tiredness. Although since these commonly occur in everyday life, they may have been completely unrelated to the virus exposure. Quote, either way, levels of the virus didn't climb high enough to trigger detectable levels of antibodies, T cells, or inflammatory factors in the blood that are usually associated with symptoms. Other studies also suggest it is possible to shake off COVID during the earliest stages of infection before it establishes a proper foothold. For instance, during the first wave of the pandemic, Dr. Leo Swalding at University College London and colleagues intensively monitored a group of healthcare workers who were regularly exposed to the infected patients, but who never tested positive or developed antibodies themselves. Blood tests reveal that around 15% of them had T cells reactive against SARS-CoV-2, plus other markers of viral infection. Possibly memory T cells from previous coronavirus infections, i.e. those responsible for common colds, cross-reacted with the new coronavirus and protected them from COVID.
Whoa,
That's pretty fucking cool, eh?
that is crazy.
Yeah, understanding how frequently people abort nascent COVID infections in the era of Omicron is complicated because it requires intensive testing for the virus, antibodies, T cells, and other markers of infection, and because so many people have been vaccinated. quote, it's likely vaccinated individuals are exposed to the virus and block viral replication and detectable infections more commonly, Swadling said. There's also no commercially available test that can distinguish between immunity triggered by vaccination and the different variants. So unless a person has recently tested positive, it's almost impossible to know if they have been exposed to Omicron or not. And, which is also an interesting thought. Like, us being triple vaxxed, there is a possibility that like we've had Omicron enter our system, and for whatever reason, biologically, our bodies and the way that we're reacting to the booster shots have like really prevented us from.
Right now, that's a strong chance because we've all had it for sure within the last 2 months, and that's the window. That's the window. It's like 10 to 14 weeks is the window within which, like, right after you get a vaccine or a booster, that there's like a very, very small chance of you picking up COVID. And then after that 10 to 14 week window, you kind of open back up to being able to get it, but the protection you have against it being bad is
still
strong.
there. Yeah. It's interesting. I was talking to a friend of ours the other day who's also pregnant, and her husband had COVID in January, and he isolated at home and had to stay in a separate bedroom. And during the time that he was isolating, she didn't get COVID, and neither did their other son. But then a couple weeks ago, she was going into work. She still had a couple weeks left before she started her maternity leave, and took a PCR test and tested positive with absolutely no symptoms. And then, of course, she had to stay home with their son. And she said that her son was like drinking from her glass of water and like doing all this stuff that like she was like, it was impossible to like, I had to take care of him. It was impossible for me to like keep him from being exposed to like my potential virus, even though she didn't have any symptoms. And after like the 10 days or whatever, their son didn't get it. Like it's interesting. Like maybe maybe he's Matt Damon, and maybe he's totally immune.
Well, we were talking about this the other day, and we were chatting about the same instance the other day, and something that kind of popped into my head was how, because COVID is so new and for most of the pandemic was very not understood. It's probably only in the last 6 months that we've had gotten our heads around COVID in a bigger way. But one of the biggest sort of like psychological misunderstandings I think we've had is that if you're around somebody that gets COVID, I think psychologically, and I would include myself in this group, is that you think that you're for sure going to get it. It's a virtual certainty, and and whereas with any illness that you can pick up from somebody else having it, it doesn't matter if it's COVID or the flu or whatever. It's just not the case. Like there has to be proximity plus whatever those environmental circumstances are for that transmission to occur. Obviously with COVID, it seems to be, quite high and very transmissible, but it's not a guarantee when you're with somebody, but psychologically, I think I feel like that. And I think most people probably feel that way.
Yeah, me too. It reminds me of like it's another thing I think that will change from my perspective post COVID is like that fear now of like, being with like Maddie and she gets sick with the flu, and even if we knew it wasn't COVID, I would be probably more hesitant to be around her or be exposed to it because of my experience with COVID. And I think of, pre-COVID, a couple Christmases in a row, I got really sick, and Maddie was like taking care of me, and we were still sharing the same bed and still sharing the same space without any
out of wedlock.
Yeah.
Oh my god!
But without any
no-no.
concern of
God.
me possibly transmitting the flu to her, and inevitably she ended up getting it, but it's not something that you really think about.
It's almost the exact opposite.
Yeah.
Here's a interesting story and completely different. I thought this would be kind of fascinating. Landmark trial compares LSD and psilocybin trips and finds very few differences between the two. So a new study published in the Journal of Neuropsychopharmacology has reported the results of the first modern clinical investigation to compare the acute effects of psychedelics LSD and psilocybin. The landmark study reveals little subjective difference between the two psychedelic drugs beyond the effects of LSD lasting longer than psilocybin. Clinical research on the therapeutic uses of psychedelic drugs continues to move forward at an incredible pace, which we've covered extensively on the show in the past. Scientists are currently investigating how psychedelics can be used to treat everything from depression and anxiety to cluster headaches and Alzheimer's. But something that hasn't been clinically investigated beyond blurry late-night college dorm room conversations are the differences between LSD and psilocybin. And understanding these differences will be important as psychedelic researchers begin to focus on the best ways to therapeutically utilize these previously taboo substances.
Does it say what like dose they're comparing? Comparing?
I'm not sure. Anecdotally, the differences between LSD and psilocybin often hinge on a natural versus synthetic binary. Mushrooms are natural, so they lead to like a mystical, organic, and introspective experience, while LSD is synthetic, generating electric, jagged, and sci-fi experiences, which is really interesting because like I've done both of those drugs a lot over the last few years, and anytime anyone's ever asked me, most people I know who do partake in psychedelics on like a casual basis, most people have had an experience like you guys have had an experience with mushrooms, psilocybin, but a lot of those people haven't had experiences with LSD, and oftentimes I'll have people ask me what the key differences are in the experience, and they are quite similar, but like they sort of nail it the way they explained it here. But I would always say doing psilocybin is like watching the Lord of the Rings trilogy, whereas doing LSD is like watching the Star Wars trilogy. They're both epic journeys, but they just have very different qualities to the way the stories kind of feel. You know, like with the Lord of the Rings, it's very earthy and like magical, whereas with Star Wars, it's very like neon and lasers and like cosmic, right?
Technology.
Yeah, and it is like that really is like the biggest difference between the two. But setting aside recreational context and zooming in on the acute effects of the specific drugs, there has been very little research actually done on comparing the two.
Do you think part of that is shaped by your sort of like preconceived idea of what the experience will be like, or do you think it's just totally...
it's pretty obvious. Yeah, like even from like a visual standpoint of like how the visuals feel between the two drugs. You know, like you get distortions with both, but like the distortions on psilocybin are they're really like wavy and breathy, whereas like distortions on LSD are like almost like everything's like outlined with almost like a cell shading kind of cartoon-esque, and like things move, but they move in more of like a geometric sort of spacey way. It's hard to explain, but it is it is very obvious that they're not the same. One of the earliest studies directly comparing the effects of LSD and psilocybin was conducted all the way back in 1959 by Harris Isbell, a controversial pharmacologist. Isbell's work on psychedelics began in the late 50s, reportedly at the request of the CIA, and mostly conducted using African-American prisoners in jail for narcotic offenses. Interestingly, his initial findings indicated the two drugs generate similar experiential effects, echo the findings of this new published research. The new study, led by Matthias Lechty from the University of Basel, recruited 28 healthy participants, around half of whom had never taken a psychedelic drug in their life. Each subject completed 5 test sessions: placebo, LSD, which was 100 and 200 micrograms, which is essentially 100 would be 1 tab and 200 would be 2 tabs of acid. and psilocybin, 15 and 30 milligrams. The sessions were double-blinded, randomized, and each separated by 10 days. A number of psychological and subjective measures were used to track the effects of each experience, as well as blood pressure, heart rate, and body temperature. The researchers took regular blood samples, tracking hormones such as cortisol and oxytocin. Levels of a molecule called brain-derived neuropathic factor, BDNF, were also tracked, as prior studies have indicated it could be a useful marker for neurogenesis.
Did we do this math before when we were trying to figure out like how much psilocybin would be in like 3 grams of mushrooms?
I
did.
I think that the study that we looked at, which was the study by the British fellow that I wanted to get on the podcast but haven't been successful in doing, it was they were studying psilocybin versus the antidepressant drug. And that was, I believe, 25 milligrams. And we thought at the time that was like extremely low, but it was that 20, like in a gram of mushrooms, there's X amount of milligrams of psilocybin. And I believe it was like somewhere in the neighborhood of like 3 to 5 grams had 25 milligrams. Somewhere in that neighborhood.
Yeah.
Because I was imagining, like, it sounds like it would have to be a fairly significant dose of psilocybin to be equal to a tab or two of acid. Right?
Yeah. I don't know. I could probably whip up the math. So 30 milligrams of psilocybin is like slightly less than 5 grams. So which that makes a lot of sense compared to like a tab of acid. You're looking at like a 3.5 to like 4 gram kind of experience with like 1 tab of acid. The quote subjective effects that were induced by both doses of LSD and the high 30 milligram dose of psilocybin were largely comparable, whereas the 15 milligram psilocybin exerted clearly weaker effects. The researchers write that in the study that, quote, ratings of the high 30 milligram psilocybin dose were nominally between the 100 and 200 microgram doses of LSD, indicating that 30 milligrams of psilocybin corresponds to about 150 micrograms of LSD. So yeah, again, it's like 150 micrograms, tab and a half. You're looking at like a 4.5 gram dried mushroom trip. Yeah. Which is it's a substantial trip. Like that's
Isn't it funny how we're like how because these things are unregulated and not legal, like we have to like translate from like lab specific quantities to like
what we did to
that's
what
like,
we did at the party.
That's like one piece of toast with peanut butter and a handful of mushrooms, right?
Yeah. Across a number of scales used to measure subjective altered states of consciousness, the differences between the two psychedelics were mostly dose dependent. The highest psilocybin dose tested led to slightly lower subjective effects compared to the highest LSD dose. Psychologically, the effects of the two drugs were slightly different. Psilocybin seemed to lead to greater increases in arterial blood pressure, while LSD resulted in elevated heart rate. Overall, however, the researchers indicated that these differences were somewhat negligible. Quote, when combining elevations of heart rate and blood pressure into the rate pressure product, the high dose of psilocybin and both doses of LSD exerted overall similar cardiovascular stimulation, whereas the smaller dose of psilocybin exerted overall weaker effects, which all that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it's funny because I used to like when I first took mushrooms, I remember somebody who had like not had mushrooms before asked me what I thought it would be like to do acid, and I was like, I imagine that if smoking weed was like riding a bike and eating mushrooms was like driving, a car, then dropping acid would be like blasting off on a spaceship.
Yeah,
but then
not so though.
But it's funny because the more I would eat mushrooms or like experience a mushroom trip, and the more I would eat, the more I was like, whoa, this is like profoundly like mind altering and like can be a very intense psychedelic experience. So then I was thinking like, man, how much more intense could dropping acid be? But I
Yeah,
guess
well-
basically depending on dose, it
And that
can be a similar
psilocybin is
experience.
like psilocybin is specifically is very you know, I don't know how you guys feel, and I know that we're kind of like comparing and contrasting around different substances, but like for me, if I were to smoke weed or eat weed, like there's not really a big difference between quantities. It's kind of like an on or off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And whereas
Yeah.
Yeah,
with psilocybin, I mean, like you can take a half a gram of mushrooms and just generally feel like really like in just like a really good mood. Like you're not gonna have any like you're not gonna have any obvious distortions or anything that you really see. You're just gonna feel really great.
But you take
And,
5 times that amount, then you're like, whoa, this is a
you're
very
gonna
different experience.
and you could feel like you could feel like you're in another dimension. So
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
it's very I think a lot of people, especially people who haven't had that experience, which for whatever reason, that's the idea or the fear, especially behind an unregulated product, is that it is on or off, and that the
Yeah.
on could be really bad.
I think that's a really good point too for people who haven't experienced that or who have maybe like smoked weed before, but like would be worried about, what are nervous to try other psychedelics like psilocybin or
Yeah.
like LSD. It is that like with THC, I know I'm either on or off, and I actually don't care for the feeling of being high anymore. I just get too paranoid. But with psilocybin, I really enjoy it because I feel like it's more of like a meditative, like more of like a like um I don't know, like more of a mindful journey that I
Yeah.
take when I eat mushrooms rather than just like getting high
Yeah.
and fucking being paranoid.
They, I mean, to your point that you made earlier, Brian, they say at the very end of this article, they say these findings further support the view that alterations of states of consciousness that are induced by LSD and psilocybin are more likely dose dependent rather than substance dependent, and that the differences in their pharmacological profiles do not relevantly influence subjectively experienced effects. So it's for someone out there, for anyone out there who's like, just recreationally exploring psilocybin and has like the interest in trying LSD to see what that experience is like. Just know that it's not the LSD that like that we had like the fear of God put into us when we were kids,
Yeah,
thinking that
yeah.
it's some
I
fucking
think
crazy altered state that is different than if you're doing mushrooms and you want to try LSD. Just know it's gonna pretty much be the same. The colors will be different, and it's just gonna last significantly longer.
And that's really like that type of research is like really important. And now
Yes,
I'm recalling the name of the psychopharmacologist who did the study that we're referencing with the psilocybin and the
dosage.
antidepressant.
Yeah.
His name is David Nutt, and he has. I would really recommend anybody who's interested in this topic. I could not recommend more listening to David Nutt on Peter Attia's podcast. He does an incredible job at going into the objective impacts that different drugs have on individuals and then their knock-on effects on society.
Yeah.
Versus how we've treated those drugs in society and the disconnect between those two in a lot of cases. And like acid is probably at the top of the list. Like
Yeah.
in terms of how demonized it is socially.
Yeah.
But how that demonization does not translate into the effect that it has on a person who participates in it.
Speaking of a more sci-fi trip, this is a really interesting article. Inside the push to study sex in space. So late last year, a team of 5 Canadian academics published a proposal calling upon major space organizations to, quote, embrace a new discipline of study. This new discipline, they argued, may provide vital to the success of planned efforts to push deeper into space and potentially build off-world human settlements. They called this supposedly game-changing new field of research space sexology, the scientific study of extraterrestrial intimacy and sexuality.
Isn't this fucked?
In other
Isn't
words,
it fucked
fucking
up?
in space.
Isn't it fucking crazy that there's a real scientific proposal?
Oh yeah. I'm gonna get someone on the show to talk about this.
That references colonizing another planet, and that and like that is like.
But how could you not look into that?
I mean,
if you with someone like Elon Musk in the world who's like, I want to put people on Mars for real. Like, how can you not explore this?
I know. I know, but isn't it fucking crazy?
We're living in the future. Quote, rocket science may take us to outer space, the proposal's authors added in a related article. Quote, but it will be human relationships that determine if we thrive as a spacefaring civilization. It's easy to brush this proposal off as frivolous musings of horny academics, overstating the importance of their specialties and in hopes of
that's what we were doing.
Yeah.
It is really funny.
But if you pick through the text, it actually lays out a simple yet compelling argument. If we ever truly want to establish off-world settlements, then we need to be informed. Plans for managing relationships and reproduction in those outposts. Sexual intimacy is vital for most people's physical and mental health. So astronauts on multi-year missions may want or even need to maintain some kind of sex life while in space. We know that space environments can seriously warp any number of bodily processes, and by extension, that sex and intimacy in space will not work like they do on Earth. Yet there has never been a concentrated, dedicated effort to hash out the details of how to manage these core aspects of human life beyond our little blue orb.
Do you guys feel like it was a massive missed opportunity to not ask Chris Hadfield about jerking off?
Yes.
Yeah.
Like if we could redo that conversation, do you think it would be a priority to ask that question?
I think if you asked him if you framed it from using more scientific language, he probably would have just not even missed a beat.
He wouldn't have, but you know what he would have done? And I know this for a fact because I spent so much time with him. He won't go there. He won't talk about it.
Oh, really?
And this is NASA's prerogative and CSA and ESA and JAXA, like all those agencies.
I feel like it's off brand.
They very much are not willing to even touch the subject.
Why?
Well, they kind of go into it in this article. Maria Santaguida, a psychologist at Concordia University.
Her and I just connected on LinkedIn.
Yeah. Again, we're gonna have her on the show. We're gonna try. And one of the proposal's co-authors notes that she and her colleagues are not the first to highlight the importance of studying sex in space. A handful of researchers spread across several continents and disciplines have been pushing this point for at least 30 years. Over the last few years, especially, concerns about our collective lack of knowledge in this field have started to catch on with the public as well. A few artists have even created eye-catching speculative designs and prototypes of contraptions meant to help astronauts bang in the void in effort to get people thinking about the issue. I added the word bang.
I was going to ask.
And so I looked into this. There was this woman who made this like fuck sack for astronauts. The third law of motion may not be the most romantic starting point for sex in space. It is, however, crucial. The law states that every action has an equal and opposite reaction. And on Earth, that's fine. Two people moving away from each other can rely on gravity to stop them from flying across the room. But in a weightlessness environment, that would be a problem. As a way to overcome it, Vana Bonta, she's a writer, actress, and sci-fi poetess and space enthusiast, developed Two-Suit, a two-seater spacesuit that will zip two astronaut lovers inside. Vanna came up with the idea in 2006 on a zero-gravity flight arranged by the National Space Society, but didn't test the suit until September of 2018. Its inaugural outing was on board the G-Force 1, also called the Vomit Comet, that stimulates zero gravity. During trials, the History Channel filmed the first weightless kiss for this documentary, and Vanna spoke of the suit rather disconcertingly in both romantic and practical terms. She said, quote, "The feeling of no attraction between two masses impressed me," she said. Once you attach the suit, 2 people can be inside of it, like a large bag, and have some privacy. Also, it can be useful in emergency situations as it can store body heat. At first, we found it impossible to kiss, but the two suits stabilized us, she added. In 2 years' time, people could go on their first honeymoon in space, but this needs to be done responsibly as there's an issue of pregnancy. And pregnancy is an issue when we think about this whole idea of fucking in space. And there's a lot of risks associated with it. So here's the things that we don't actually know about sex in space.
I'll just say before you say that it might be because I am having a baby at any moment, but from the very beginning of this conversation, that's all I thought about.
Yeah, totally, right?
So I was like, making a baby. This is about making a baby in space.
Yeah.
How do you proliferate?
The thing before you go into like describing that, like the thing that strikes me so much about this is like obviously there's a proposal for this to be studied. So isn't it funny when like, you know how like everything that happens on the International Space Station is like laid out and like itemized in an agenda and schedule and like every like the timing of everything is so important, and everybody in the control center and like all involved parties are like, you know exactly what's going on.
It's like a big episode of Big Brother, a floating episode of Big Brother for everyone at the Johnson Space Center.
Right. So they're just like, okay, up next, John and Jane are gonna
fucking the 2-suit capsule,
the 2-suit, and so they like the other astronauts that are like standing by are like, okay,
we will be doing this today without contraception,
so
make sure you do not put on the space condom.
Which is just so funny because does it not have to happen like that? Like, isn't that how it would have to? It
would if it was. It would if it was up there. Yeah, like on the ISS.
Right. Like they're not just like they're not just like, hey astronauts, we just put the 2-suit on board in case like you're interested.
If you don't put it on the sketch, it doesn't happen.
Yeah. I mean, well, I will say this. Like one thing that I know, one of the problem, and this is speculation, but I feel pretty confident in saying this. One of the reasons why they're probably not really very much into the idea of their astronauts having sex, because like the ISS missions are co-ed, right? We've got there, oftentimes there's more than there's a female astronaut, oftentimes a male astronauts that are going up. So at any one given time up there could be several females, several males.
People have banged on the ISS.
I was thinking
right.
So,
but here's my point. And yes, very possible, but NASA or whoever else we're thinking about here in terms of the organizations, they're not going to want that to be happening strictly because of the social problems that could arise from that. You get 2 astronauts up there start fucking, and then they have a blowout of their relationship, and they've got 2 more months to be up there with each other. Like that could be really bad.
Do you think so? Do you think though? Because like I would guess, Tay, I'm with you. I would guess that it probably has happened. But are there not cameras like literally everywhere on the ISS?
No.
I imagine there was like a live feed going back to like. You don't think so?
No.
For sure not.
Not in everywhere, no, because they've got to have some privacy, or else they're already so psychologically taxed just by their very situation, let alone like.
I feel like that's why the training is so intense.
Can you imagine nutting in space and just seeing a bunch of fucking jizz like floating up past your face, and you're just like grabbing it?
Imagine you
funny.
One astronaut did that, and then it just like fucking got stuck on the control. Well, because it could get stuck on the fucking control console or something. It just floats, or it just floats and hits the wall. You got to dispose of it.
Do you think you could like while the jizz is floating around, you could grab it, manipulate it, make like little little cum origamis? Like
that will be a thing.
Maybe.
That will be a thing eventually.
Since early days of human space exploration in the mid 20th century, we've recognized that low gravity environments have major effects on almost every human bodily system, like blood flow, muscle and skeletal strength, even hormonal balances. We've also recognized that without the protection of the Earth's magnetic field, people in space are exposed to wildly high levels of ambient radiation that over time can mess with our body's DNA, potentially leading to a host of conditions ranging from radiation sickness to cancer to nerve degeneration. early space biology understandably put a focus into figuring out how to keep astronauts alive in this hostile environment and how to rehabilitate them once they return to Earth. These early space missions were also so intense, brief, and cramped, usually just a couple of people in a tiny metal can hurtling into a brutal and unknown vacuum, that there was no reason to ever really consider sex. But in the 1980s, after the Soviet Union launched the Mir, a groundbreaking space station that allowed astronauts to remain in space for months on end, space scientists, including some in the United States National Research Council, started to raise concerns about the effects of long-term space travel on sexual and reproductive health. Reports from the time stress how little we knew about the effects of space environments on fertility and sexual functioning. And when the USSR started running co-ed missions, also in the 80s, public commentators got to musing in the press about the prospect of sex in space. Was it happening? Would it be? What would it be like? Would it be even safe? Over the last decade or so, the increasingly real prospect of sex or space tourism and settlement efforts has fueled a new burst of popular interest in extraterrestrial sex. Articles, conferences, and even TV specials on the nitty-gritty details of how doing it in space might or might not work now abound.
I bet CTV makes a good one.
They detailed how in low gravity environments, any thrusts or push might send two people flying away from each other. How low gravity's effect on hormone levels and blood flow might take a toll on people's sex drive and make it harder to get physically aroused. How liquids pool up for a lack of gravity, potentially leading to giant globs of sweat and cum floating about.
They didn't say cum.
that.
They did. They actually did. I didn't make that up. In the 80s.
Who wrote this article?
It does.
Ice?
Yeah.
This
isn't a Google Doc, so it's hard to say that Jared didn't just add that. In,
yeah.
No, I didn't. In the 80s, NASA reportedly dismissed concerns about the effects of space on sexual health as, quote, professional carping by biologists, a big stink over nothing. Quote, they believe the annual studies in space that some scientists have called for are difficult and uninformative. Celia Hooper of the United International Press wrote in a 1988 expose on the topic, a waste of cargo space. Eventually, the agency has changed its tune. A NASA representative told Mike, this is from a website called Mike. It's a magazine article or website. Told Mike and its partners have, quote, studied the basic science of reproductive physiology in several species, including fruit flies, worms, snails, jellyfish, frogs, chickens, and rodents.
Whoa, do they have jellyfish on the ISS?
Dude, they have everything up there.
No.
Yeah. Several other space agencies and external research groups have conducted their own studies on space effects on sexual and reproductive health, and academics have just started to compile comprehensive reviews of their findings.
Dude, what is it like having a jellyfish in water?
It's the in space. A jellyfish in space is the same as a jellyfish in water.
Right.
Yeah, man.
Sense.
Yeah, you take a jellyfish out of water and bring it like we pulled one out right now. It would just be a blob of nothing in my hand. But you take a jellyfish out of water while in space.
Yeah,
the jellyfish is just a jellyfish,
but it couldn't live.
And it goes it does this.
No.
It flies around.
That makes me think of like all those.
It's got nothing to push against.
Like all those animes where you see like basically like fish or whales and stuff in space.
Floating
they suddenly now make so much more sense.
Yeah.
Though obviously they're not alive.
Hey guys, the science checks out.
So I mean, this article goes on and on and on, but pretty fucking interesting stuff, eh? Just the thought of like, someday, very likely someday, someone is going to be the first person born in space.
That is crazy.
Do
you? See, yeah, that's a major obstacle, right?
It's got to be.
If you had
look at Kyla. Well, it'd probably be a lot easier though. Like Kyla, I see Kyla walking around and I'm going, Jesus Christ, man. What's it like walking around with that fucking full on like kitchen pot inside your belly full of stew?
But it's not the person carrying the baby. It's the how do, like, how when an astronaut leaves Earth, it's like Chris Hadfield said, the first piss you take,
your bones,
you start pissing out your bones. You have like a massively elevated calcium content in your urine after the first time you pee once you leave Earth.
That's what I love.
This baby being born.
babies.
This baby
like,
being born
bone
is going to be
structure-
born like Ivar the Boneless from Vikings. He'll just be born with these like gangly, fucked up legs that just like no.
And
there's
like
no-
how and in that development stage when all those systems are forming and blood is and like blood supply is like a crazy. I mean, it's the thing that makes a
Wouldn't it be-
pregnancy happen successfully. So how does that?
Wouldn't it be
occur
wild though? Like
successfully?
if it was just like the first baby is born in space and they're going, we really have no idea. This baby's probably going to come out just mush and just like no bones in it, and it's just going to be like a sheath of baby skin with like fingers and toes, and the baby comes out fully formed and just goes, "Hello, everyone. We've been waiting." You know, it's like space. It was like space took the baby.
We used to. It's funny because that's what we actually. It would be appropriate for Taylor to have a kid there then, because we used to call Taylor No Bones when he got really drunk. You know.
No, that's Kyla, dude. Kyla's No Bones.
Kyla is No Bones.
I'm not
You
No
guys-
Bones.
you guys-
I'm Wrecking Ball.
Except that one time.
Taylor's
when I,
Taylor. I'm Boner King.
The- Boner James, actually, which is funny.
I'm Boner King.
Can you imagine how like insufferable Taylor would be on cocaine?
What's really funny is the time that I was walking home from a party with Taylor to my mom's house, and we were both really drunk, but Taylor was on a different level from me.
Extraordinarily drunk.
And it was the middle of winter, and halfway home, it was like a 10-minute walk, and it took like 40 minutes. And halfway there, Taylor just said, I'm just tired, man. And he just laid down in the fucking snowbank. And I was like,
Oh my
dude,
God,
get
that
up.
was bad
And
news.
I could not get him up. And he was so heavy. And then finally I was like, dude, the cops. And he just stood up so solid and shit. And he was like, I'm good. I'm good. And I just kept having to say, dude, the cops are there. The cops are there. He's like, I'm good.
I'm good.
I'm good. And then he walked home and then he peed all over my basement.
Oh my God, Jesus Christ. And this fucking psychopath's gonna be a dad in a couple of weeks.
That's why I really love the movie Wall-E, because it's
Don't
so accurate to like the human beings that live in space. They just have to float around on these like floating pedestals or like
wheelchairs,
floating like wheelchairs, basically. Yeah.
Here's a really fun kind of well, I mean, I was gonna say feel good article, but I'm sure someone's not gonna feel so good about it. We had a wonderful live show about a week ago or 2 weeks ago now, with our friend Hannah from all the way over in the Netherlands, and Hannah is a animal technician who works specifically with lab animals, animals that are being tested for cancer research. And of course, her specialty is with mice. And one of the big things we talked about on that live show was the ethics that go into treating the ways that we treat these animals when they are in that environment. Of course, these animals are euthanized for the benefit of human life and for drugs and treatments for cancer. And so that's a very sad thing, obviously. But Hannah's job, and thank God people like her exist. Her job is really to be there to make sure that these mice live the best life that they can while they're in this place that they've found themselves in. So Hannah actually sent an article in our Discord. The article is titled "Playpen Access Improves Rat Welfare." There is a growing evidence to suggest that providing rats with access to playpens, enclosures containing a wide range of environmental enrichment items than other than standard caging, improves their overall welfare. During playpen sessions, rats can perform species-specific behaviors, including upright stretching, burrowing, and climbing. Facilitating natural behaviors such as these have been shown to promote good physiological and psychological health, which reduces animal-to-animal variability and improves the quality of data obtained from those animal models. Here's an image that came with this article. I fucking love this fucking picture. Just three
That's very cute.
super adorable mice in a McDonald's fucking ball pit.
No offense to whoever wrote this article, but this is about as This is about as obvious to me as
I
saying
know,
that humans
I know.
do better when they're allowed to speak to each other.
Yeah. Rats who are able to use a space that is larger and more structurally complex than standard housing are reported to be calmer and more confident when handled. In this new paper, Professor Emma Robinson and colleagues add to this evidence base, showing that spending time in a playpen increases indicators of positive effect state mood in rats and reduces the impact of a negative experience. Emma and the team used an effective bias tests to look at the impact of playpen sessions on male Leicester-hooded rats that had been given FG7142, a drug known to induce an anxious state. After spending 1 hour in a playpen, the negative effect of FG7142 on the rat's mood was significantly reduced, suggesting playpen access could be used to refine studies that involved adverse procedures. So literally making these rats anxious, putting them in a fun house and seeing that the drug that's making them anxious doesn't even hold on to that effect.
Isn't that a fucking crazy study though?
It's wild.
When you really think of it, and like you can just basically, to really get a gauge for what they're doing, you can basically just substitute rat for human.
Yeah.
Imagine it's like we took the group of humans and injected them with this thing that made them have anxiety,
injected
feel
them with
anxious,
LSD without their knowledge.
and then put them in
And
a
they're
McDonald's
freaking
ball
out.
pit.
Yeah, and then we put them in a fucking like we put these grown adults in a children's like daycare center, and they loved
Actually,
it.
they were chilling.
They were painting, having a good time, talking about all sorts of stuff. This is kind of cute. The team also showed that rats found exploration of a playpen to be a positive experience. The welfare state of rats can be measured by recording the frequency of their ultrasonic vocalizations. So
That's crazy.
calls that fall within the 50 kHz range. What's that? That's like kilohertz?
Kilohertz.
Kilohertz. So calls that fall in the 50 kilohertz range are associated with positive experiences such as mating, playing, and consuming food and being tickled. Aw. And thus can be used as a way to quantify welfare. So during the exploration of a ball pit or playpen area, rats emitted significantly more 50 kilohertz vocalizations than when they spent time in an empty control area. It's like, again, it makes me so happy that they're getting this, but it makes me so sad that this is how they're getting
They
it.
had to study it too. Like
Yeah.
they're like it's like a schoolyard of kids like playing together, imagining that noise, and then looking at an
And
empty
then an
schoolyard
adult
with,
coming
like,
and plucking one of them up and just breaking their neck in front of all the other kids. You know what I mean?
I love that you went there.
That's not what I had in
Hey,
mind, but-
hey, they broke the neck ethically though. They've got techniques. They do it real quick.
It was
They do
an ethical breaking.
Oh shit! So sorry, everybody. Listen, let's change it up. This is the last one for today, and we'll wrap it up. This is fucking cool, man. This is really cool. I love 3D printing. I think 3D printing is a really neat thing. This was put in our Discord from Stina. Thank you, Stina. This 4,000-year-old skull just received a new face. So for 4,000 years, a woman laid undisturbed in a stone-lined grave amid the forests of northeastern Sweden. She had likely followed animal migrations through the trees and along the Indalsälven River when she died in her 30s of unknown causes.
Sorry, I think, is that an IKEA product?
Yes, it's the Indalsälven shelf river. When she died in her 30s from unknown causes, she was buried with a boy, perhaps her son, estimated to have been around 7 years old, which is fucking crazy because you're going, hold on here. She
How
died,
did you?
and then they were like, well, just bury the boy with her. You know, put the boy's fine, but
and the boy wasn't dead. They ethically broke his neck.
That's right. Yeah.
And
Oh
then
my
they just
God.
put him in there.
And then they tossed a few Cro-Magnon balls in there to let them play. Fast forward to 2020 when Oscar Nilsson, an archaeologist who meticulously uses clay to reconstruct faces from thousands of years ago, he was approached by curators from the Västernorrlands Museum in Sweden. The museum had in its possession the two skeletons. He excavated from a century ago from from a hamlet known as Lagmansuren.
That's a dining room table.
Yeah. The Stone Age pair were the oldest skeletons found in that region of Sweden, where harsh conditions don't lend themselves to preservation. The museum was building an exhibit tracing 9,500 years of human habitation in Sweden and wanted to show visitors the oldest face from the north, the woman from Lagmansuren. But what would her face look like? So over the past 20 years, this Nilsson guy has become a pioneer in reconstructive archaeology, bringing more than 100 long-deceased human ancestors to life. He begins his work by layering more than a dozen muscles made of clay onto a 3D printed replica of the discovered skull. He then places small pegs to indicate tissue depth, which varies depending based on age, gender, weight, and ethnicity of the individual. These pegs hold up a layer of plasticine clay skin. Many features can be accurately predicted using the record left in bone. And when Nilsson went about building the Stone Age woman's face, he considered what he already knew. She was just under 5 feet, short even for her time. She had protruding teeth, which shaped her mouth in a distinctive way. Her nose was a bit asymmetric. From her profile, he could tell it was turned upwards. Her eyes were set low in the face, and the mandible bone, the lower jaw, was quite masculine. She possessed an interesting blend of male and female features, he thought. This reconstruction took Nilsson 350 hours to complete, and when he was done, the woman was clothed in a tanned animal skin made from Stone Age techniques by Nilsson's colleague, Helena Jerem, and a bird claw necklace dangled from her neck, and a tight bun kept the hair off her face as she traveled among the trees 4,000 years ago. So here's a photo. How fucking wild is that? That's not a real human.
Whoa.
Isn't that cool?
Oh, that is
This guy
really
made
cool.
that.
Man.
How neat is that, man?
Man, with the with a lot of the
that's crazy.
you know, Jerry, you and I are both big fans of Corridor Digital, and
Yeah.
they've been doing a lot of work with like AI,
Yeah.
recreating voices and faces and stuff. And
Yeah.
it's interesting to see that like you could then map like a voice to it and
Totally.
and start to animate it and basically bring back somebody from however many years ago.
Yeah.
Which is
Yeah,
wild.
it's pretty cool.
I think there's something about like Roman, or like once you go back before like Roman Empire and like the Greek like ancient Greece, like once you go back further than that, it seems like it's a lot harder to like wrap your head around people existing and what that was all about. Because I guess I don't know. I'm not good enough at history to know this, but like I get the sense that like Greece is
Pre-Mesopotamia.
is sort of like the first major like widespread example of like city building and
It was like
I mean I guess that was probably happening in other places, but
I think it was Mesopotamia
Mesopotamia.
first, and then Greece was second, and then the Romans.
but that's all
but
in the same
before that-
place.
That's
is it not?
that's also not considering the fact that there most certainly was ancient aliens, and they were here
Those
probably
were,
Right.
probably
Egyptians,
7 or 8
the
million
Egyptians.
years ago. That
Of course,
and
yeah.
flying ships and shit.
Yeah, but like the first like Homo habilis, was Homo habilis the first one, but like the evolution of like the human skull and like
Mm.
how like how tools using tools like shaped
Mm.
the way that the pre-human human beings interacted with one another. It's
Yeah,
really interesting.
Yeah, cool stuff.
Crazy.
I'd like to see more of this Nilsson guy's work because it's very fucking fascinating. Well, that's it, folks. We don't get to what the health this week. Just kind of cutting things short. Hope you enjoyed this week's episode of Feel Good Friday. Of course, we're always here Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. And if you want to support the podcast, you can leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts, or you can hit us up on Spotify on the mobile app and leave a review or a rating if you're listening on there. Yeah.
And if you want to send us a letter, if you want to send a letter of congratulations to me and my recently possibly grown family, you can do that by sending that to letters@sickboypodcast.com. Or if you want to, say anything to us that's, more related to, what we actually do, you can do that as well. And if you want to be on the show, you can go to sickboypodcast.com/contact and fill out the guest form.
And if you're just looking to continue this conversation that we're having right now with us online, you can join us in our very own online community on Discord. Which the link to our Discord server is in the show notes of this episode, on YouTube, on wherever you get your podcasts. And as always, thank you to the folks that make this show happen. Jeff Lonis, our manager, Rich O'Coin for the theme music, and then everybody else for all the other work that they do throughout the week. Thank you so much.
That is it for this week.
I'm Brian.
I'm Taylor.
And I'm Jeremy, and this is Sick Boy.